Hi, Cassie.
Hi, Allie.
I'm so excited to talk to you today because it's been a while, and because this is just a topic that I think you and I could probably go on and on about. We've done a little pre chatting to this and have had a lot to say. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. It is Autism Acceptance Month, and we want to acknowledge that and talk about it and bring it to everyone's awareness, and especially related to what we do here, which is, breastfeeding support for new families, education. And I asked you in particular because you have some particular expertise in this area. So I'll let you mention what that is. So if you could just kind of tell us who you are, what you do, why you do have some something to say about this.
Yeah, so my extra training is I am certified as a neurodiverse lactation specialist, which is just some padding to my IBCLC certification or license, really, or just some extra education in that area in addition to being an IBCLC. And it was an extensive training to discuss, how we can best support families that are on the spectrum.
Yeah. So neurodivergence, what exactly does that mean for anybody who maybe isn't aware? Because I think there's been some evolution of the term and what kind of diagnoses or what kinds of diagnoses kind of fit into that broader term of neurodivergence.
Mm-hmm. So I think, it is such a wide spectrum and is such a large umbrella that fits under that. And so I definitely want to be conscientious of making sure everyone that fits into that umbrella feels represented, but really it's just an acknowledgement of like how our brains work and how they process information. And just the differences in which people think or
Yeah.
behave, etc.
Yeah. It is broad. So there's, different types, and there's also milder or more severe. And so there's a lot to know about that. And so I think it's really cool that you got that special training, because I think for a person who is neurodiverse, there's a lot that could be confronting in pregnancy and birth and in breastfeeding and parenting too. And so it's good to acknowledge it ahead of time. It's good to have someone like you who's there to support them, and with that recognition, right, that there are some things that might be different for them, some different ways that you might need to support them, that it's things you might do differently, recommendations you might make. So what brought you to do this training? Like, why were you interested in adding this to your specialty?
Yeah, so I had suspected for a long time that I was on the spectrum, and so I kept, diving in and trying to just take in more information about autism, specifically sensory processing disorder, and I found that it was like really challenging to be diagnosed. The wait list is incredibly long. It can be really challenging to be seen like in that capacity. But I kept talking about it, and I kept like investigating it more. And I'm very lucky that I am married to a physician, and when he was in medical school, when he did his psych rotation, had, been told about some testing that he knew of. And so he thought that I was not at all on the spectrum. And it was kind of funny because like I kept telling him like, these are the reasons that I think I am, like, and he kept being like, no. And then which just to be clear, he's anesthesiologist, so like psych is not his like area of expertise, but he very much was like, no, no. So when he had access to some testing and brought it home, it was under the guise of, I'm going to show you that you are not. And so it was very hilarious that, that I scored quite high on several different categories, but very low on the social, which is funny because I think I'm just very good at masking, and like I can, women especially are really good at masking. And so it isn't always obvious, like to people, that someone might be neurodivergent or that, they're processing information differently. And a lot of times I was working really hard to ensure that, I was perceived in a certain way. And so after, doing this and seeing like the areas or categories that I scored quite high in, I started to make accommodations for myself, and just found that like things felt so much easier when I started accommodating my own life. And then, went on to then my 7-year-old has sensory processing disorder, which we found through his sleep stuff. Like he, if you've seen previous videos, like I am, a certified sleep specialist. And what brought me to that work was that my son, didn't sleep through the night at all for many years. And we then found out that he had sensory processing disorder. And it was through OT that we were able to kind of figure that out. And so then it just all started to make sense, right? Like our whole family, we were like, okay, this is all starting to make sense. And so yeah, that's kind of, so then this training popped up as the woman that was facilitating the training. It came across my feed online, and I was like, absolutely, I have to have that. And so I went on to do this training that was extensive and wonderful, and I'm very thankful to have done it.
Yeah, we have, I think we've had several members on our team at Breastfeeding Success who went on and did this training. And honestly, I think all or most of them kind of have a similar story where, they themselves are neurodivergent and recognized that at some point and realized that it did make a big difference. Knowing that can make a big difference in the experience you have, because you can, like you said, make those accommodations just to make things easier for you. Make you more successful at things. And so I think it's really fantastic that this is out there and that people are starting to recognize and acknowledge this. I've never been diagnosed, but if I were tested, I might score, somewhere along there with you. Because there are a lot of things that I've learned about myself over the years with more information that's out there that points me in that direction too. I have a lot of sensitivities and things I've overcome and recognized later. But so I can definitely see how having someone like you, having a care provider who is sensitive to that, aware of that, and sensitive to that, can really even get you farther than when they don't, right? Get you a lot farther. So in that way, then, like, moving on to your work. So you are a lactation consultant and IBCLC, and you see people, I mean, you've been seeing people in the hospital, but also outpatient telehealth. So you've seen people in a lot of different, in their homes probably too. And so you've done so much of this. And since you've had this training, how has that changed for you?
Yeah, so I think, one of my superpowers has always been the ability to kind of read a room and take in, what's happening in that space without anyone telling me. But I feel like it's been magnified, like even more so. I feel like it's helped me kind of really be able to sense, like, if someone needs some additional support, in the sense of, like, adjusting the lighting, or knowing when it's time to, like, take a break, or considering things like that maybe I would have noticed but not felt as comfortable to, like, ask, like, would you like me to turn off the lights, or would you like to take a break? Like, maybe I wouldn't have been as comfortable to maybe ask those things. Whereas now I feel like I am. So I do think that helped a lot.
Yeah. And so when you're going to meet with someone for the first time and you have some forms in front of you that they've filled out, some information about them, do you get, like, I know you were telling me before that question's on the form, or there are some questions on the form related to that, right?
Yeah, so we do have it on our intake forms. We have a couple different things like autism, sensory processing disorder, ADHD, on the form, but I don't know that I personally necessarily see that utilized often. Like, people tend to leave it blank. Um, and yeah, I just invite people to utilize that. Like, we're not doing anything with that information. It is protected. That is just between you and I. That information isn't going anywhere else, but it does help us know how to better support you. And so I do think it is beneficial. If you're not comfortable doing that and you don't want to say that, of course, don't. But I'm just kind of putting it out there that, like, it is only to your benefit to share that information with us so that we know how to best support you.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say, that there are a lot of people who maybe don't check that box or check those boxes because they don't know?
That's very good possibility. I mean, honestly, yeah, for sure. Getting tested it's very challenging. It's a very long road. The wait list is years long sometimes. It can be quite challenging to be tested. So definitely. And I think, the more that we're utilizing, things like TikTok and things like that, where people are sharing their stories and their experiences, I think a lot of people are self-diagnosing, and I want to acknowledge that as a valid um, form, in my opinion, of diagnosing yourself. I think is totally valid, and at least in this regard. And so I think even just sharing those sensitivities, if you feel comfortable, I think even if you've never been diagnosed, you can totally still check that box if you think that that applies to you, for sure.
Yeah, right. Because who's it going to hurt? All it's going to do is tell you that you can, ask them some different questions and offer some different solutions for them related to their breastfeeding. Right. Yeah.
I think one important thing, anyway, just from a lactation perspective, is that ultimately, regardless of whether someone is neurodiverse or neurotypical, like, we should always be asking lots of questions and really investigating things anyway. Like, we should really be asking, like, in a perfect scenario, like, what would this look like to you? I ask almost everyone that, regardless of, of what their needs are. And I think the more that we really investigate and be curious about their experience, like, I think the more they will open up and kind of talk about any extra accommodations that might be necessary.
Okay. So just kind of maybe a little list, but what kinds of things in general do you think might be difficult about breastfeeding for someone who is neurodivergent?
Mm-hmm. I definitely don't want to make any assumptions, because, again, it is such a wide variety, or such a big spectrum, that one person might experience X, Y, and Z, whereas somebody else of the same diagnosis that isn't a thing for them at all. And so I think, really, again, just like investigating and asking lots of questions can be really helpful. But some things that we really want to take into consideration would just be environment or space. Is the lighting too harsh? From a sensory perspective, there could be just like the wetness from your clothes or the wetness from leaking, could be a bit more challenging. The baby crying could be really stressful. Are there too many noises happening at one time? Is there any, like, overwhelm or feeling overstimulated by certain things? Maybe the sound of the breast pump is challenging. So I think there's such a wide variety of things to take into consideration. And that's why everyone's so different. And that's where we have to really get curious about what their experience is and what is feeling hard and what is feeling easy. So that way we can almost understand them a little bit better so that we know how to better support them.
Okay. And so when you're offering solutions for them, ways to help them, I mean, obviously, like you said, you're asking all these questions, you're finding out like, okay, is the baby crying something that's really hard for you? And the feeling of the sticky milk on your skin or the baby on your skin or any, certain things like that, the sound of the pump. If you know these things, then obviously those are some things that you can help them with, right? So find alternatives that, so what kinds of things maybe as solutions do you maybe see the need to offer a little differently or more often for a person that you might suspect or know is neurodiverse?
Yeah, that, creating a space that feels super comfortable to you, whatever that means, like having some of your favorite objects with you, I think can be really helpful. Certain pillows that you like or certain blankets that you like. You can bring those things to your appointment with you. So that way we can kind of help, help with latch and positioning using the things that you feel like are the most comfortable. Finding spaces in your home that feel good, even doing a home visit versus an in-person visit, or I'm sorry, like a office visit, I mean, could be beneficial for some people. So that way we can really help, accommodate your needs in your space where you are more comfortable. Always, just thinking of what your needs are and then kind of going from there. It's like, are you, sensitive to sensory things like stimuli? Do we need to dim the lights? Do we always use lamps rather than the big light? Noise, using headphones or earplugs if you feel like noise is too much, right? Changing out your breast pads often so that way you're not feeling wet. Finding a bra that feels really good and supportive without being too tight or restrictive. Any like fidget objects, like while you're breastfeeding, do you need like worry stones or something of that nature to like hold on to and kind of play with, like a fidget ring or something like that? Weighted blankets like on your body, not necessarily on the baby, but like over your lap could feel good. I'm particularly sensitive to heat, even living in Texas. Like it would be 110 degrees outside. Like I would make my air conditioner super cold so that I could still use heated objects. That's a big one for me. So I use heated blankets. When I was breastfeeding, I would lean back on like a heating pad. So it's just like finding those things for yourself and figuring out what that is. But yeah, those are some ideas.
Okay. So some of those might be great ideas, if someone's watching this and they identify as neurodiverse and want to maybe set some things up for themselves ahead of time. Those might be some good things to recommend. Anything else that you could think of as far as like someone who is not yet there but going to be there? Things they can do to maybe get an easier start?
Yeah, I mean, I really think just considering yourself and who you are and what your sensitivities are, and then doing that thing, like meaning creating that environment that feels comfortable to you. One thing I can think of is like breast pump parts. Sometimes like the execution of like the washing and drying and like doing all of that can be challenging for some people. And so I always think it's worth it if possible to get like another pump kit. So maybe you're only washing every other time instead of every time. That might make it a little bit easier. Throwing your parts in the dishwasher versus like hand washing them. Just finding little cheats like that can make it easier. Yeah. I think, again, it really is because it's so person dependent. I think we really just have to keep investigating like what those things are for each person. But that's another one I can think of that would be common.
Okay, so for some people, like you said, you're really good at picking up on social cues and things like that. Not everyone is. And in fact, like some people who might identify as neurodiverse, that's a big struggle, right? To be able to notice in another person or even in ourselves sometimes what we're feeling or, anticipating a need. And so like, I know for myself, it was, I could never like the early hunger cues, the early tired cues that you're supposed to look for to know your baby's ready to take a nap. Like, I knew what they were. I could see them written on paper, and I could never translate that into real life. I could never pick up on those. So by the time, I found my own workarounds, right? My babies are now 15 and 18. They're great. They breastfed for a long time and they're healthy and they sleep great. But when they were little, and they couldn't tell me with their words, I had a really hard time picking up on that. And so my workarounds were to do things like with breastfeeding. It's just like, I'm just going to have a boob there like all the time. just in case, because I can't tell if you're hungry or not. And by the time you're screaming for hunger, like that stressed me out so much, because that sound of crying was definitely one of mine. Like it was just such a stressful situation. So to avoid that, it was just like, okay, you can just be here all the time. Other people might like to be very structured, very disciplined around that breastfeeding, or like, so are there things that you might recommend for people who, maybe are struggling more to pick up on those cues from their babies when they don't have words?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, crying would be a late hunger cue and a sign that some of those early hunger cues had been missed. And so I wonder if like getting into a cadence of like, okay, at the 3-hour mark, baby, consistently cries out for food. What if we set an alarm on our phone for that 2.5-hour mark? So we didn't let it necessarily escalate to tears, but we could still catch it earlier, maybe setting an alarm on your phone for every 2.5 hours. So that way we would remember to then like offer the breast. I think that could be a good idea. It's just like setting alarms for yourself. Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would have been helpful for me too. Okay. That's good. And just recognizing too, that sometimes, like you said, you ask those questions, like, what are you good at? What are you not good at? What are you having a hard time with? And then you can offer them little suggestions like that. That would have been, like I said, a really good one for me for sure. Do you ever have to give advice that maybe you wouldn't typically give, or that maybe isn't your favorite kind of advice to give if you do have someone with those kinds of special needs and circumstances?
Absolutely. So I love this question because as a lactation consultant, and I feel like the longer that I was in the lactation world, the more I feel like at first, when you're a baby lactation consultant, you're just so excited about like everyone breastfeeding, and you want everyone to breastfeed, you want everyone to be successful. But then you start to learn, like over time, like your goals are not necessarily the same as everyone else's, and that's where we really have to be accommodating to what their particular goals are, just period, regardless of whether or not they're neurodivergent or neurotypical. Like, as much as we want babies to be breastfed, like we need to meet the family where they're at. And if their goals are to combo feed, like that is something we absolutely should be supporting. And I feel like investigating that a little bit more, so that way we know how to best support them. Like, are they combo feeding because they're worried about low milk production, even though we know that that's where we can really reassure and kind of guide them in that direction of exclusively breastfeeding. But if they're in a space where like they need to be combo feeding in order to be successful, then we absolutely should be accommodating that. And same thing with like exclusively pumping. I think exclusively pumping can sometimes feel easier for some parents because they feel like they can see the volumes, they can be on more of like a schedule versus like following the baby's lead. And I think that can be really helpful for some people. And so that might not be my initial thought of like, yeah, let's exclusively pump, because I, from a lactation consultant lens, like I know the work that goes into that, but I know like it can sometimes be more challenging. But for some people, it's actually the easier thing, right? And so that's where we really need to acknowledge like each person and their own unique individual needs and what that is, and then meet them where they are to support them and help them create a plan that does feel sustainable for them.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think, like you said, this being one of the possibilities, one of the reasons behind why someone would do something that to us maybe looks a little bit batty. Like, you want to do what? Like, to me, exclusive pumping would have been my worst nightmare. I would have, like, pumping was so hard for me. It was definitely not my favorite thing. But again, like, if you have someone who just really needs something very consistent and very, like, even if it's more work, more time, more effort, it's at least something they can, be very consistent with. And so maybe that does feel emotionally easier to a lot of people. And that's so important. That should make the top of the list, right? I mean, of priorities is your emotional health. So for sure, I love that you said that. And I imagine that it might come into the conversation even more, like for someone who's neurodivergent. And so the training that you did to learn more about this and how to support, a neurodivergent parent even more, has that been useful? Do you feel like doing that training, and in what ways?
Yeah, I think it's been really helpful in me accommodating that space a little bit more, just like the physical space. Whereas maybe before, like, I felt like I've always been good at like reading the room, but then sometimes I would question like, oh, am I just being sensitive, and this person doesn't really need that, and so then I like wouldn't do the thing. Like for lighting, for example, it's like I feel like that's been one that I see. Sometimes I can sense that like things are feeling a little tense, and sometimes just turning the light off and just using a nightlight in the room, like while they're nursing, like I'll see, parents' shoulders like soften and they just seem more relaxed. Whereas maybe I wouldn't have felt as comfortable to like turn the light off before. I would have felt like, like, oh, are you just being sensitive, or is this like actually happening, right? And so I feel like just doing little things like that, it's empowered me to like make changes in the physical space, whereas maybe I wouldn't have been as accommodating in that way, or just even thought of it, honestly. Like,
Yeah,
like it just wouldn't have even crossed my mind to like, oh, just flick off the light, it's not a big deal. But it just wouldn't have even come across my mind.
exactly. I was just thinking that. I was thinking how many times I've been to a doctor's office or any kind of, and how that's almost never um, offered. It's never part of the deal unless, like, I go to my acupuncturist. And it's like the lighting and the sounds and the smells, and it's like, okay, this is even just that is healing right there. And it definitely makes the whole, I think it makes everything more effective, because when you're relaxed, when you feel comfortable, you can share more, you can relax more, and usually stress does not help anything, right? So I think that's great, even if that's the only thing you got out of that training. It's so important. But I know you got more.
I did, but yeah, I just feel like that stuff. My outpatient, the time I spent in outpatient was in a hospital environment, and so it just, you get caught up, I think, in just like the day to day, because I'm always in fluorescent lighting, and even though it's uncomfortable to me, I've just kind of learned to live with it. But like, maybe we don't need to do that. Like, maybe, especially in my office, like my office had lamps, and like it was super cozy in there. It wasn't, hospital furniture. It's like we brought our own, Breastfeeding Success brought our own furniture and made it super cozy in there. And so it's like, it doesn't have to feel like a hospital just because you're in a hospital space. And so accommodating that, I think, is lovely. Doesn't have to smell like a hospital. It doesn't have to, the coldness doesn't have to be there.
Yeah, and I mean, we know breastfeeding works better when we've got the good hormones flowing, and we need
to feel safe,
comfortable and safe and relaxed to let those hormones do their work. Okay. And then, like, have you had many neurodiverse clients, whether they explicitly told you that they are, or whether you've just strongly suspected?
That's a great question. I don't know because it's not something that I feel like I would necessarily ask or, I mean, I think, yeah, over the years, like, of course, like I've seen thousands and thousands of families. So I think it would be naive to think that I didn't see a huge chunk of people that would have benefited from some sensitivity. But again, like I think I've always been good at just like reading the room and like, knowing when to take a break or knowing like I feel like that's always been a little bit easy for me. And so I do feel like if I have seen families and didn't know it, I feel like my primary goal has always been to ensure that my parents feel safe with me. And so that has often meant like keeping my hands behind my back, like not necessarily physically helping with latch and positioning, like talking them through it, always asking permission first, asking lots of questions to get to know their unique personalities better. So it's like, I'm sure without knowing it, I've seen tons of families, but I don't know. I can't make a guesstimate on like what that would be, what that number is, or I can't guess that.
For sure. And so I think that's a great place to kind of leave off, is to say that that whether you've seen a lot or a few, but anybody who might be watching this who does identify as neurodiverse, to know that there is help out there, and that if breastfeeding is hard, if any part of this journey is hard, that you might really benefit a lot from getting some support, and that there are people like Cassie out there that even might have some special insights and special training to help you, but that hopefully, any lactation consultant at least is going to ask you a lot of questions, and to go in with information for them too, so that they can best help you, but that there are ways. And even if breastfeeding is a little uncomfortable, or it feels like the most complicated thing that you've ever been presented with, that you can get help and be successful.
I love that you said that, because I really just want everyone to feel cared for and supported. And I want parenting to be enjoyable and even fun. And so I feel like if there's any piece of this that is feeling really hard, like please like reach out so that we can help, make it more comfortable for you, even if it's non-conventional, even if, I'm always willing to investigate with you and figure out, what that means. Even if nothing I said today, like landed with you, like maybe your sensory needs are different than like anything I described today, like I am always willing to figure out what that is with you. Yeah.
I believe you. Well, thank you so much. I think and hope that this will be helpful for many people.